Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 30th episode of Text Messages. It's May 3rd, 2018. We're glad to be broadcasting from central Minnesota, more specifically Elk River, Minnesota. Well, actually, technically it's called Otsego, but here's the thing with that. Otsego was first incorporated, out of township or whatever, and it's about 1990. So, I mean, it's not even 30 years old, and we don't technically have our own police department. Fire department, we have to go to Rogers or Elk River for that. So, property taxes are a little cheaper, which is nice based on that. But on the same hand, if you go on Craigslist and you try to tell people where to go and you tell them Otsego, then they get confused because they're like, well, this is Elk River. It says Elk River. But I mean, it's like, well, the zip code's 55330. So just follow that, and then the yellow brick road will bring you to Otsego, Minnesota. But it's more fun to say Elk River too, so that's why I'll oftentimes refer to it as Elk River instead of Otsego. So I mean, if you have, Otsego, that doesn't really describe anything about the town. It's just a name which has basically nothing to do with anything really. Whereas Elk River, I mean, it says river, it says elk. Elk has very healthy meat, especially if it's wild game or pasture raised, organic, and all that. Bison meat is pretty good too. Cow meat is probably the most common to find, and obviously you want to get it from a farm too, so it's organic and locally raised and all that stuff too. So we broadcast out of Elk River, the same central location as Tony DiNucci's pro wrestling. They go around to different high schools and then have pro wrestling matches and cards set out for them and everything too. So they've had a few of their guys make it into WWF, but maybe one or two. I mean, it's pretty hard to crack the big leagues, but they seem to have a few guys that can get the job done. So yeah, it's pretty awesome to see to give support to local entertainers, I guess you could call them, ladies and gentlemen. And to be 100% honest with you, I've been to major WWF shows in Target Center or XL Energy Center, and I've been to local pro wrestling shows at my hometown high school or some weird ice hockey arena or an armory. And to be honest with you, going to the local wrestling shows are probably, they are a little bit more interactive than the big time WWF shows, and in all reality they're probably more entertaining too. Obviously they're cheaper, but I suppose once in your lifetime you could go to a major WWF show just to see all the guys in person and get on second thought, maybe you don't even need to do that. The local wrestling shows, they're mostly, the guys involved in that could be, Big Joe Rosso that lives down the road, obviously, but it's just people are having a good time, and it's serious business, but they're getting into it, and fans are getting involved with it too, and it's just a better experience. Yeah, when we went to this one show it might have been about 10 years ago now. Well, there's one gentleman there. He was pointing at this little kid in the audience, and he was giving that sign like he's going to break him in half, but the kid might have thought that wrestling was still serious business back then, and that it wasn't staged and everything too. So he didn't appear to be frightened in any way, shape, or form, but he was definitely getting into it, and I'm sure it's something that he would never forget. So just that the pro wrestlers have the insight to target certain members of the audience that they know will have a lasting impression from it shows that they are truly organic entertainers with good intentions in mind. And it's not to say that you need to dedicate your entire life to entertainment, not build society, but it does help to be able to step away from serious business every once in a while, and then just to enjoy your time too. The more we enjoy our time, the easier it is to get along with other people, and the easier it is to get along with other people, then we can work together to build great things and make America great again, and St. Cloud great again as well. So that being said, speaking of working together, ladies and gentlemen, so the other day I finally got all my car parts in, invested the valve cover gasket, got a new one of them. it was leaking some oil. Then it would leak onto the exhaust manifold and burn off, and it would smell bad. So I was worried that I might have to get a new electric car, but turns out it's just a valve cover gasket, so just fix that. There might be a bit of a fuel leak somewhere too, so that's probably something that shouldn't be taken lightly. But I mean, for now, you can't rip the whole car apart just to find some little smell that may be entirely fabricated in your imagination as well, so in your olfactory nerves. But the valve cover gasket is rectified. I had to check it temporarily. It's a good idea to check these gaskets every once in a while because they may leak after you install them and put them on. So then the thing with that is the cylinder head is aluminum and the valve cover is plastic, so you can't really wrench it down too hard. You just read the service manual. It says 9 foot-pounds, so then you got to try tighten them down in one of those star sequences. Up, down, left, right, select, start. Go through a couple cycles of that, and then you can wrench it down to the 9 foot-pounds, which really isn't that much. To get a torque wrench that goes down to 9 foot-pounds, it has to be quite a small one, probably less than, the handle's probably less than a foot lengthwise, which is very short for a torque wrench. Sometimes you get those torque wrenches where you got, a meter or maybe a half a meter long for a handle, and those are used for torquing down axle nuts and just giant semi-truck tires, just big things that do big tasks for society. But once the valve cover gasket is on, check it temporarily, make sure it's not leaking. And it's very important to follow the directions too, because sometimes when you get different materials like that together, plastic and aluminum, the manufacturer may require that you torque them down, heat up the engine, and then torque them down again. However, if the manufacturer does not require that, what could happen is if you heat up the cylinder head, tighten down the valve cover, and then when it cools off and you go through winter and you go through these wide-ranging heating and cooling cycles, you could improve the chance that the valve cover will get cracked. So that's why it's very important to follow the instructions to a T, ladies and gentlemen. But the service manual basically just said tighten them down in the star sequence and then tighten them down in 9 foot-pounds and pat yourself on the back and call it good. So yeah, that hopefully will work for now. Temporarily check the valve cover, make sure it's not leaking. It's a pretty simple fix too. So yeah, it's just good to get that out of the way. Then you don't have to smell burning oil when you're driving down the road too. Because it's a good car. It's a Honda. See, the thing is, I've had that valve cover off a couple times. Once to try to adjust the valves, which is completely unnecessary, and then another time just when I first got the car, the engine, I got it from a junkyard, so it seemed like it was a good idea to pull the valve cover off and then dump the oil on all the valves in the timing chain. Otherwise, if you start the engine up and the engine's been sitting for a very long time, the oil can drain down, so it's all in the pan, and then there's none up in the cylinder head. So if you have metal on metal for even a little bit, it can wear off those parts a lot. So it seemed like a good idea to just slap some oil on right away and then call it good. But yeah, then you got the 3 spark plugs too. These spark plugs for this particular car, 3-cylinder car. The spark plugs are indexed, so you look at the block and it'll say A, B, C, and D, and you buy the spark plug based on that. But they are a little expensive. And the thing with indexing is the fuel injector fires the valves pull in the fuel at a certain point, and then the spark plug fires it. So there's a little knob, sort of an L shape, that comes off the end of a spark plug, and that L shape points in different directions. So indexing means it's pointing in a specific direction to where it burns the most efficiently. And with the Honda Insight, for example, they want the car to get 70 miles per gallon, so every little inch, square centimeter of the car, they're taking efficiency into consideration. And it happens that spark plugs, they do as well. Now, I could have probably just got $5, $8 iridium spark plugs and call it good, but figure, if the spark plug lasts 100,000 miles, you may as well spend the extra $20-$30 on the index one, which in all reality, over the course of 100,000 miles, if you're getting 1 mile per gallon more, it's probably not beneficial. The indexing might be made in a way too that the spark plugs last longer, but but who really knows about that? Unfortunately, as I alluded to in an earlier episode, a lot of modern day manufacturing doesn't take longevity. Actually, they do take longevity into consideration, but they take it into consideration the way that they don't want it to last very long. However, with Hondas and Toyotas and just Japanese manufacturers in general, they seem to just want to build a quality product and put time and effort into it and make it reliable and efficient and run well, and have decent performance too. Which is what's been readily apparent is pretty much any Honda I've ever gotten in. Sounds like maybe the quality has deteriorated lately, but they manufacture a lot of Hondas in Ohio. They got a bunch of facilities set up there. So I mean, they don't manufacture a lot of the cars, but a lot of the parts they manufacture there. Maybe like a Honda Civic or an Accord they might make there, but most of the cars are probably made in Mexico or Canada now. The ones sold in the U.S. and the North American market. But the quality at the Honda plant, this is what I've heard through the grapevine. The quality there is way more stringent than at a General Motors plant or a Ford plant. I mean, not only is it just, just because it's American workers doesn't mean it's crappy. It means that they're still following the qualities adopted by the people in Japan that initiated the car manufacturing and did what they knew required them to be successful long term, and then just respect for the owners too. I mean, yeah, you got these people that like Ford over Chevy or Chevy over Ford and everything, but pretty much anyone who goes out of the way to buy a Honda or Toyota know that they're getting pretty reliable cars there, and cars that are going to be built to last, Duralast, and that they can pass on to their kids and their kids' kids and all that stuff too. Today, I mean, another car I got is a 95 Civic, which probably is eligible for collector plates, but since I still drive it around, since I still drive it around frequently, it doesn't really require one. And it's just a great car. The seats are comfortable, it's reliable, it looks cool, it has decent performance. The car bangs through all the gears just fine, doesn't make any noise. Tires wear good, it gets almost 50 miles to the gallon at certain times of the year, and this is just your average Honda Civic. 2-door, 5-speed manual transmission. It doesn't have any of the junk like power steering or power windows or none of that garbage. It's just a car. It goes from point A to point B. That's basically all it needs to do. And that's all I need it to do. And yeah, the paint is a little oxidized, but I mean, the thing had a brand new paint job, the car would look like it just rolled off the assembly line, and it would feel like it rolled off the assembly line too when you drive it. So I mean, yeah, obviously for profitability, it helps to build quality cars because there's always going to be more people in the world. So if Honda continues to build quality cars and guys like me buy them and I can proclaim their glory to the masses, then everybody else can think, well, yeah, maybe I should buy a Honda too. So Honda's definitely got something figured out in that regard. I mean, you respect your customers and your customers will respect you. If General Motors, for example, I've had a few General Motor cars, Pontiac Sunbird, Oldsmobile Intrigue, and I even got a GMC pickup now, and the thing is, it's absolutely not made with quality. I mean, power window, so one of the power windows rolls, the driver's side power window doesn't roll down, the fans don't really work. We had to go through a transmission and well, the engine went bad, but that wasn't the fault of Chevy or anything. But just a bunch of random electrical components go bad and stuff. Yeah, the truck still runs, but there's a lot of annoying and irritating problems with it. And yeah, it's a 98, so it's getting up there in years. But I mean, the 95 Civic, you don't have any problems with that. Everything works as it should. Now, yeah, you got to rotate tires and change oil every once in a while, and maybe change brakes here and there. But other than that, you don't really have to do a whole lot. So, I mean, I changed the rear drums in the Civic a couple of years ago, and now they work just fine. That was might have been the only time they were ever changed in the entire lifetime of the car. In 20 years, they probably just changed the drum brakes once because, I mean, when the car is balanced right and when it's lightweight and you don't stand on the brakes every stop sign, you don't really need to change brakes that often, especially drum brakes. Drum brakes usually, I'm not sure if they last longer than disc brakes, but usually on these older cars they had disc brakes in the front and drums in the rear, so the rear brakes had a lot less pressure applied to them. That's why they would last longer. I mean, you could probably buy some old Honda Civic and have the same drum pad in it for its lifetime, as long as you're not driving like a complete buffoon or qualifying for an Indy 500 every time you hop in the car. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, as you can probably tell by now, we don't really have a central topic for today. I was probably going to meet with the host of Good Times Balls Deep pretty quick here. Hopefully today, exchange some ideas and merchandise, and then maybe he can start running the show on 8 cylinders. So he's the sponsorship deal is valid next week, so he'll be able to get funding for that. Hopefully maybe get a nice fancy studio and good sound and lighting and all that too. It might not even be a video-based show. I mean, like this show, we got a camera and all that, and that's basically all we have. The insanely expensive camera. No, I mean, maybe I don't really know what'll happen, but I'm just know that it's gonna make St. Cloud great again. Have co-hosts and all that stuff, so they'll make the show great again. These are scholarly individuals, very highly intelligent. Based on what's been happening in society lately, though, I mean, the show might be good times, serious business, so good times in the front, serious business in the back, or whatever, 50-50, whatever the case may be. But it's always in flux, ladies and gentlemen. There's no central planning from some propaganda machine or corporate interest. It's just all whatever comes to the host of Good Times Balls Deep or Good Times Serious Business mind, probably 5 minutes before he goes on the air. So I mean, that's the type of program that I prefer watching. Just good old fashioned, hard-working men and women of America and just the world in general that just hit the ground running and speak their mind and speak it in a scholarly fashion and in an entertaining fashion as well. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Text Messages episode 30. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. We'll be back in 4 minutes. Welcome back to Text Messages, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. We're glad to have you here once again. It's Thursday morning, May 3rd, 2018. We're full throttle into, well, I guess technically still springtime, but feels like summer. We've been upper 70s lately. You know, it's the time of the year where you can walk around with swim trunks on outside and nobody really seems to care. Yeah, that's the thing. If you're going to go to a gym that doesn't allow you to have your shirt off, it's probably not the right gym for you. I mean, yeah, if you're some 70-year-old person that just wants to be in decent shape, maybe it's an okay gym, but I mean, ultimately, if you're going to be working hard and sweating and all that, it's preferable to, probably just to have swim trunks on. That always seems to work best for me. Otherwise, you get those weird clothes on that are made out of synthetic polyester, then they get into and under your skin and just cause a bunch of, maybe not a bunch of problems, but enough problems to not want to have to deal with that. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna get into a bit of a topic here right now. Solar panels. Solar panels, they started to become a big thing around the 70s. You know, they used the polycrystalline silicone and they always had that blue shade to them. And lately they haven't really gotten much more efficient than they were back then. I mean, yeah, they've gotten cheaper and better quality and they could last longer and all that. But the efficiency of them is still probably around 20%. And when I say efficiency, I mean the amount of light that shines on a solar panel, if it would absorb 100% of that light, then it's 100% efficient. But it only absorbs about 20% of that light, of that energy. You know, I shouldn't say light. I should say 20% of the waves hitting the solar panel. Because visible light is only a very small spectrum that we humans can see and interpret. There's millions, billions of other wavelengths that we don't even see or feel or touch or hear or smell. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. With solar panels, if they can absorb every single wavelength of waves, then they'd be 100% efficient. But they can only absorb about 20% of them now. And that's probably on the higher end based on what's out there in the market. And they got them so they last about 10, 20 years. And that they can survive hailstorms and tornadoes and hurricanes and Bigfoot attacks. I mean, that's really what you need. Just something that'll last a long time, that'll be reliable and low maintenance. I mean, if you got to go replace some power converter wires every couple years, then it would just be a big hassle. So having something reliable, low maintenance is ideal for solar panels. But the other day I was looking online. There's a study at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. So they had, for a long time, a lot of people have been a lot of educational facilities have been experimenting with perovskite solar cells, which are intended to tackle stability, cost, and efficiency. But what they found, see, perovskite is made with calcium, titanium, and oxygen in a specific molecular amalgamation arrangement. But when they have them in their organic state, then they're really prone to heat and they deteriorate when they're exposed to heat. So I mean, if obviously sun creates heat, so you need to have it stable in heat. And what the Okinawa researchers found, or experimenters found, see, there's a big difference between research and experimenting. If you just look at stuff and read books and say you can do things, it's totally and entirely different than to actually do things and to experiment with things and see what happens based on what you're doing with them. Now, see, that's why it's always difficult to believe everything that, or most everything that a theoretical physicist says, because the experimental physicists, they're the guys that are actually getting in, or girls that are actually getting in there, getting their hands dirty and figuring out what works and why it works that way. Whereas a theoretical physicist, they're probably just sitting around all day and they don't really know what's going on. They're just making stuff up and hopefully throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hopefully something sticks, or that, media or corporate controllers takes over and proclaims to us as fact or biblical accuracy. So anybody who's done any type of engineering work knows that what you theorize and what actually happens is totally different. If you get engineering textbooks and you read stuff, everything in there is an ideal scenario. Now, if you do an experiment on it, you're going to find that nothing is really ideal. Now it's close and it's a starting base point, but for the most part, people that actually experiment, you learn when you get your hands on things and you really get down and dirty, that's when you really learn a lot about the materials you're working with. If you're just sitting around reading books all day and not touching anything, you're not really going to know much about it. Yeah, you'll know more than somebody who doesn't do anything about it, but to be a credible resource is just not an accurate statement. So it is important that if you're going to really learn something and deep dive, then you got to experiment and get your hands on it, get your hands dirty. And for example, these gentlemen that use perovskite to make solar cells, ideally in a theoretical state, they probably think, well, calcium, titanium, oxygen should work. But once you heat it up, it starts to deteriorate. Now, they probably didn't know that until they actually did the experimentations. And what they found is that if they can create synthetic inorganic elements of the calcium, titanium, and oxygen. See, nature is a very fickle mistress. People don't really know. Nobody really knows why a grass grows or why a solar panel breaks down when it's exposed to heat. We make these complicated software programs that they're sequential coding, and if you get a leaf of grass or a banana peel or a pineapple tree, all of the DNA, we can just call it programming. The Almighty programs it. So there's just thousands of parallel programs. They're all dependent on each other. It's spaghetti programming, basically. So if you work for a software company, engineering, programming, computer coding, if you write a program, you don't want it to be spaghetti code because you want to have it to where you can sequentially analyze things, and if something goes bad, you can just pull it like a pasta ravioli. You can just pull it off the stack and it doesn't cause a big ruckus. But if it's the spaghetti, then you pull it and then everything comes with it. So with the Almighty's programmed everything to be like spaghetti programming, which is what makes genetic engineering so difficult and so hard to believe that it's actually safe for people and that it's not going to cause any bad ramifications. See, probably the idea behind that is, though, humans are so incompetent relative to the Almighty that if we make a few adjustments to plants through genetic modification, that it's not going to be a big deal because the plants will just correct for it, and then if we can get what we want out of the plants will just create the safety barriers and make itself great again, and then we can get a hard tomato instead of a soft tomato. But we don't know that for sure. It's just it's throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks, for example. And that's not to say see, it's one thing as a human, to try to replicate God and to try to create, people or plants or to genetically modified plants. But it's a wholly another thing for humans to create things like an automobile that's entirely man-made. It started off as man-made, and it's intended for men to use it, and women, of course. But trying to play the Almighty is always it's always something. All right, so growing plants, for example, you're not really you're taking what the Almighty has created and then you're using that to your benefit. You're not trying to modify what the Almighty made or to adjust it in any way, shape, or form. You're just saying, I'm just going to grow a bunch of broccolis in this grass here and throw some vitamins and minerals and plant food on it and hope it grows. I mean, there's no intricate design work where you're trying to supplant some almighty alien creature. It's just you're trying to survive, basically, is what you're doing there. So that's not to say you just lay down and die and not do anything because you're not the Almighty. I mean, you gotta do something, basically. With these solar panels, the Okinawa researchers, they found that if they create inorganic elements, the calcium and oxygen, obviously titanium is already inorganic, So oxygen, yeah, it's probably two. You don't really know why they're saying inorganic, because calcium, titanium, and oxygen don't really contain carbon. Well, yeah, I'm not really sure what they mean. Organic. When you buy organic at the food stores, it's a standard that they follow. Now, it could mean this has to contain less than 20% pesticide residue, or it can only contain this type of herbicide or this type of fertilizer. So organic is and natural, all natural. They're just standards when you get them at the grocery store. It doesn't mean they're fully void of any dangerous chemicals. It just means that they're under a certain threshold. So a lot of words have multiple meanings, and it's important to just know and recognize that, because when you see, if obviously everything all produce at the grocery store is probably organic in the chemistry sense that it contains carbon, whereas in the standard sense, where they gotta say it's organic, then it has to meet the certain requirements that they set forth. So then you only have a few types of broccoli or a couple bananas that meet those requirements. And then, of course, the price is raised significantly. That's the thing that was always a bit ironic, how if you spray a bunch of dangerous chemicals on food, you can just ship it off to the grocery store and you're good. But if you try to farm efficiently, renewably, in a clean sense, then you got to fill out all this paperwork and pay all these bills and pay all these standard issuers to say that, yeah, it's organic and I can sell it in the store and market it as organic and charge more for it. And it's one of those things where you think, I'm doing a horrible job of explaining it, but it's one of those things where it just seems totally opposite and contradictory to what a logical society would follow and practice. But there are a lot of goofy things out there, ladies and gentlemen. And when you get dishonest people, or people that allow their evil wolf or their evil angel to dictate their lives, then you got to do weird things that don't really make a lot of sense. And I know for a lot of you, the ladies and gentlemen at home, that are good, morally upstanding, hardworking people, a lot of evil things don't really make any sense to you because you just don't think like that. But someone like me, I'm still about 5 to 10% not a good person. So I'm able to parlay that into understanding how the people who become more than 50% bad people think and act, and what happens, and how some of them just obsess over just doing bad, mean things for really no apparent reason. I mean, there hasn't... See, it's sort of like drug addiction. I mean, if you start doing cocaine, you feel good the first couple times, and then you realize that the only way that there's no light at the end of the tunnel once you crowd on that rabbit hole. So if you start doing cocaine, you're gonna have to pretty much do it every day to feel great, not to be great. To be great and to feel great, two totally different things. So once you crawl down that rabbit hole, you're just having to do cocaine all the time, which is the same thing with bad, evil, horrible people that allow horrible ideas to corrupt their thoughts. So any individual is capable of being a good person, but when they allow evil and horrendous and heinous and macabre things to creep into their mind, and then they act on it, they realize that the only way they're going to get satisfaction is to continue to act on them over and over and over again. So then they just, they may do it in very obscure means too. They may go into government and get high positions, and then they got more access to a wider array of bad things they can do to people. And so, I mean, it's not just people sitting around in their basement, shooting up heroin. I mean, these are people that can get into institutes of high power. And unfortunately, a lot of people are very motivated by the allure of power. If you're a good person, you don't really seem to have the drive to be a major leader. I mean, a good person probably doesn't have... that's not to say you're lazy or not ambitious, but a good person is more concerned about just working within their microcosm of society and to grow a good family, a good support group, a good community, be friends with all your neighbors, contribute to society, and ultimately serve the Almighty. But really, people that allow bad thoughts to corrupt their mind, and they just get power hungry and power hungry off of drugs and everything too, they seem to be the ones that seek out higher, like Hitler, for example. Or Stalin, or Mao Zedong. I mean, those are examples of people that get so. I mean, yeah, they're ambitious and they're hardworking and motivated and all that junk, but the only time they feel good about themselves is if they're doing bad things. So then they just want to do more and more bad things. So eventually they get so motivated and ambitious that they grow to these insanely high powers of. They have controlling factors that really shouldn't be available to any individual human. That's not to say that individuals are bad. It just means that every single person is an individual capable of autonomy. Unless you got some weird brain disorder or whatever the case may be, which is tragic, and there are exceptions to all rules. But for an individual to just say, yeah, let's kill 90 million people that don't believe in my government or they're political dissidents or whatever the case may be, that's basically a system ripe for failure, and no good, morally upstanding person would seek that type of power. I mean, they might seek that type of power to supplant the bad and horrible people, but unfortunately, the bad and horrible people that are pursuing that, they're going to congregate with themselves, and then it's like a cancer, basically. It gets completely out of control, and then all the good people are replaced and eradicated from institutes of control and power like that. So yeah, things just get out of control pretty quickly, and what's the average morally upstanding person to do? You just do your part to try to make your local communities great again and make your family and yourself great again. If you raise moral people and your neighbors are moral and all that, then it just seems that it helps. It goes a long ways. And someday, ladies and gentlemen, we will talk about the origin of the United States, because I think the history of it is a little misconstrued. But, history books are... See, when you read history books, you don't really want to prescribe to them as gospel. Just use it as a reference point. Think, okay, so-and-so thinks this happened and based on this evidence, so if I read something else that contradicts it, you don't really know which one could be right. Everyone's got a different perspective of things. And then there's also, nobody can even get it straight how many people died during World War II or whatever, World War I, or why World War I even started or anything like that, or why the Vietnam War started. Some people might say that it was a false flag in the Gulf of Tonkin that got us into the Vietnam War. Some might say that it was some weird bombing in New York City that got us into the Iraq War, but official government documents will say otherwise. So who are you to believe? So that's why I just try to prescribe to common sense here on text messages, ladies and gentlemen, because facts is a fun word to say, and it seems like it should hold a lot of power, but they can be fabricated and made to fit certain agendas or narratives or illustrations. Most of maybe not, but a lot of scientists are just pay to play. They got to get funding from corporations or universities, colleges, so they say, yeah, we're going to study this, but the result should be this, so we're going to try to mold the experiment to arrive at those results. And if it doesn't arrive at those results, well, then it was an invalid test. And then hopefully we can get some more funding in the future, or change the testing around, or just do a better job of satisfying these corporate interests. So there's a lot of pernicious forces out there, ladies and gentlemen, that you need to be careful of, and someday we'll probably come after a few of them, mostly just the ones that market drugs to children. Those will be the biggest ones we come after. We're not entirely prepared to come after them yet, but we will someday. I'm really excited for it and exhilarated and all that. But we're coming up to a break here, ladies and gentlemen. So in the near future, we're gonna have good times, balls deep. I got my car fixed and all that, so we're probably gonna meet with him today. Maybe exchange some ideas and hardware so that he can get the show up and running and do some pilot runs and see where it's gonna lead him. I think he'll make St. Cloud great again, and I think he's excited for it. Oh yeah, he's a busy guy. Not everybody has 24 hours in a day to dedicate towards a talk show, which is just entirely hobby based and just trying to make your local communities great again. But a lot of people also feel the the calling to a higher good. I mean, it's good times, but yeah, the shows will probably have the potential of having millions of views. So, I mean, I suppose yeah, it could be funded in some way, shape, or form. But I mean, ultimately, it's probably just a hobby to satisfy a call to a higher power, to a higher good, and then just to make your local communities great again. I mean, really nothing more, nothing less. It's just you got your work, family, friends, health, and hobby, and it's just one spoke of that giant wheel. And of course, finding sponsors too, so that you can just do the basics, so that you can just live a life and not, live in a dumpster and have to film, good times, balls deep, or whatever the case may be. So it should be happening in the very near future, ladies and gentlemen. That being said, we're going to be back in about 4 minutes. Welcome back to Text Messages, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Text. We're glad to have you here. It's Thursday morning, May 3rd, 2018. Yeah, the days are just clicking by. Well, the years are kind of clicking by too. I mean, 2000 seemed like it was just yesterday, and when you had websites with the Roy G. Biv color scheme, and then you had email as the only way of communication, and shortly after that, well, I suppose, yeah, you had AOL Instant Messenger, but yeah, the days of yore. Now, speaking of the days of yore, a lot of you have probably heard about planting trees and how the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago, and the second best time is today. So with solar panels and things, wind turbines and all that junk, if you're thinking about getting solar panels, here's the deal. The best time to get solar panels might be 20 years from today. The second best time is today. So it kind of works inverted to trees. But now I talk to a lot of people here, well, not really anymore, but a couple people that I used to work with at this one particular place, and they would usually tell me that they didn't think solar was a good idea because the payback wasn't for another 15 years. And yeah, I mean, if you buy solar panels and they only last 10 years and they have a 15-year payoff, obviously it's a pretty stupid decision then. But, you got to figure, if you're buying solar panels, the payoff is 15 years and they last 30 years or 25 years or whatever the case may be, then, yeah, I suppose then it would be worth it. But there's a lot of tax breaks and subsidies, and both federal and local, which is also taken into consideration. But there is that element of uncertainty. I mean, you never know if a really bad hailstorm will come and wreck some of your panels, or some major windstorm will come and tear your roof off and all the solar panels go with it. So yeah, I mean, you can think like, well, then you got insurance for it. But the thing with insurance is just a bet against the house. So I mean, yeah, insurance sounds great and everything, but in the long run, you always pay more for it. So it's just going to cut into your investment more and more. But I mean, if you're living in some rural community that's sort of off the grid a little bit, then solar panels is probably a good idea. And not only that, but it may not seem, so it may seem like you're just doing the right thing, and by having the solar panels and maybe doing the occasional maintenance on them, or just knowing that you're creating your own energy within your local microcosm, it probably makes you more conscious of your energy consumption. I mean, you're going to be less prone to leaving lights on when you're not needing them, or maybe having your water heater turned up more when you leave for a long period of time, or having your refrigerator set at its coldest setting when you don't really need it to be. So you'll be more or maybe having LED lighting instead of regular incandescent bulbs. So you'll be more, or having an LED TV instead of an analog TV, which most people probably have in the first place. So to be more conscious of your energy usage is kind of one of the ideas. Like, whenever you're buying solar panels, or if you're going to think about buying wind turbine, they always say, well, conserving energy is probably the first step. But the thing is, when you actually make that leap to buy solar panels, or have solar panels or wind turbines on top of your house or on top of a big giant tower, then it's just some like a switch clicks inside your head where you actually are more energy conscientious. So you might have your house at 60 degrees in the wintertime and walk around with wool socks and a sweater on. Personally, wintertime, this place here is about 55 degrees. But the thing is, though, that there are certain places in your house where you spend more time. So I spend more time. So if I spend time in the kitchen, at a desk, and on a chair. So you have a heated blanket for the chair, a space heater in the kitchen, and a space heater by the chair. And then occasionally, if it gets really cold, the furnace will turn on. But I mean, if you got those two space heaters for the whole house, it seems to be just fine. And then keeping south windows open too, so when the sun does shine, that helps significantly. I mean, yeah, this place is not really temperature regulated. It fluctuates very much how the exterior air is, but it's way more affordable on energy costs that way too. So I mean, sometimes, yeah, it does kind of suck to have 55-degree air temperatures, or sometimes if it cools way off overnight, it might get to 50 degrees, but then the furnace will turn on and try to not. Obviously, you don't want things to freeze, but yeah, energy conservation. It's a simple thing to do, but yeah, I mean, it kind of helps to be smart about it as well. I mean, just to know and understand all your appliances, to know how your water softener works, how your water heater works, how your refrigerator works, how your freezer works, how your computers, how your TV works, and all that junk. So if you got a reading light at night, maybe instead of, if it's one of those old incandescent bulbs or one of those things that heats up a lot, maybe just get an LED light instead, and then you just save a couple cents every week or so using that. So I mean, I suppose maybe in the long run it would cost more money if you got to keep replacing LED bulbs, but supposedly LED bulbs last longer than incandescent, but I'm not sure. It seems like a lot of the LED bulbs I bought, they go bad after a lot less time than it says on the package. I don't know if it's what the deal is there, but some of them are not meant to be used within an enclosure or inside a moist, like a bathroom or close to moisture or water. So it is important to read the package to make sure you're getting a light that's intended for where you're going to use it. Because I mean, a lot of the lights that I had, LEDs that burnt out, they probably were being used improperly or inside an enclosure when they weren't intended to be used in an enclosure. So there's also that to consider, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just, if you look at a package and it says 30,000 hours and it goes bad after 30 hours, it's probably not a manufacturer defect. It's probably user error or operator error, user defect. And as far as solar panels go, I mean, I don't really know if they consistently and reliably last 30 years, or maybe after 10 years they're not as efficient anymore. Maybe the covering on them gets faded and they're not absorbing as much sunlight too. So it's very important to know and understand. And then with solar panels too, there's so many manufacturers coming up, and then a lot of them are probably manufactured overseas, or some of them might be manufactured locally, but I mean, they've been around since the 70s, but you're not going to find too many solar manufacturers that have been around since the 70s, which is, it's a bit of a red flag. But I mean, it's a very highly subsidized business, so what that means is that government can basically control it very meticulously. When things aren't market driven, they don't have a consistent pattern that you can follow. For example, I mean, cars, people start buying more. Cars are subsidized to some degree, especially the Japanese manufactured ones. But they have a pretty clear pattern of people buy more of them as the population grows, or as there's more roads and everything too. So I suppose when all the roads are funded through taxpayers, you could say that that's funding the automobile industry as well through subsidies. But it's nice to have roads and freedom and all that stuff too. So it's a great thing to have that. And I mean, market. But I don't know if anything nowadays is entirely organically, in the metaphorical sense, capitalist driven, because, I mean, number one, after the 2008 fiasco, it became pretty obvious that there was socialism for corporations, and then the rest of us are just kind of on our own. And then the low class, that's just the welfare class, which is, the Federal Reserve can just print monopoly money and then just hand it off to the welfare class. And so as far as why there's still taxes on the middle class and to some degree the upper class, it's a bit of a mystery, but it seems to be just so that they can sort of control what they do and pick winners and losers. Taxes is basically just picking winners and losers nowadays, because the Federal Reserve can just print any money they want and give it to government, which is what they've made abundantly clear over the last 100 years since their inception in 1913, which is why there's an $18 trillion or whatever, probably going to be $19 trillion by the end of this broadcast. Well, that's why there's the debt, because the Federal Reserve can just print any type of money they want. Then countries like China or Japan will just agree to buy them up. And the thing with that is they're also printing their own money. So they print their own money to buy money from the Federal Reserve that allegedly funds federal and state government. Now you may be wondering how the federal government can shut down if they can just print monopoly money. But that's just all horse and pony nonsense. Most things that go on in government are just intended for deception and just to cause a ruse, because most people that actually care about government are just corporate lobbyists that want to get something out of it. Because if you think of, you got the Big Ten as far as laws go, and anything beyond that, it just doesn't really seem. I mean, yeah, you could make specific examples here and there, like putting child safety locks on pills and all that stuff too. I mean, that's more just common sense than what should need to be written in common law. But by and large, it seems like most laws nowadays are just lobbyists that pay. See, somebody can go into the Senate for 4 years. Prior to their entry into the Senate, they might have a net worth of $100,000, and then they're getting their $50,000 a year after 4 years, and then all of a sudden they're worth $6 million. So you kind of wonder, how does that even happen? But unfortunately, that's just one of the worlds we're living in. Now, if we want to, we can go into a deep dive and all that stuff, but it seems that there's plenty of people out there that are willing to do that. And me personally, I probably should just focus more on health and health-related topics and how to make yourself great again. Because ultimately, that's what I generally need to focus on due to the maladies as a young child, being the recipient of pernicious forces that we will come after someday, ladies and gentlemen. So that being said, looks like we've come to the conclusion of the show for Thursday morning, May 3rd, 2018. There are a few more research articles that I'll get into on Saturday morning. Depending on what goes on in the weekend, we probably will just run 4 days a week. Maybe once Good Times Balls Deep hits the airs, then maybe we'll scale back on this show a little bit. But for the most part, we'll probably just continue to run it at 8 cylinders. And obviously nobody has to watch it, as proven by their viewership numbers on YouTube. So yeah, we may as well just put as much content as we can out there, and hopefully it'll make you, the ladies and gentlemen at home, great again. So Good Times, probably this afternoon I'll meet with the host of Good Times Balls Deep, and maybe this weekend or next week, because he's going to start getting the sponsorship next week, so it's important that we start to get things rocking and rolling and ranting and raving too. And I'm sure the guest hosts that he has lined up for the show are getting antsy and excited for it too, and they're probably ready to hit the ground running on 8 cylinders too. And I'll be excited to watch it. I'll probably be the first to tune in, ladies and gentlemen. And maybe we can get Good Times Balls Deep on the St. Cloud Public Access channel as well. Probably maybe the 1 a.m. time slot or the 3 a.m. time slot. Whatever prime time is would be ideal. So, you're watching Text Messages, ladies and gentlemen. You've come to the conclusion of episode 30. We'll be back Saturday morning. Got a lot of work to do outside as far as tilling the garden, and probably going to pick up some horse manure or compost from the county website and then spread that around in the garden. Now, normally it's a good idea to compost your own food scraps and particles and everything. And if you work for a company, if they got a compost bin or a scrap bin that they don't really use, maybe you can just bring a bucket or a garbage pail to work and just write compost on it. Then your coworkers can throw like used tea bags or banana peels, orange peels, all that junk in there, and then you can just stick it in your trunk every couple days and use it as compost in your own garden. And other people see that, they'll get excited about it too, and they'll want to probably get involved and grow their own junk and make their families great again. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching Text Messages. I'm the parasite of the show, Rick Tex. We're glad to have you here, glad to have you listening. Any comments, criticisms, compliments, questions, concerns, air them in the message boxes, or the message is on YouTube. Thank you very much.